How's it going, you awesome bunch of bakers? Welcome back to another video. Today, I'll show you how to make a unique buckwheat porridge batad. So let's get in the kitchen and get started. Buckwheat is my favorite carbohydrate to eat on a regular basis. It has a very unique and delicious flavor, especially the toasted kind, and it also has a very pleasant texture. It is super easy to cook. It is also gluten-free and it has numerous health benefits. Growing up back home, I was eating it all the time, and even now I continue enjoying it a few times a week. If you've never tried it, I would highly recommend you do. It's a great alternative to rice. In this video, I will show you how to cook buckwheat porridge and add it to your bread dough. And if you're not a fan of buckwheat or can't get hold of it, you can replace it with some other type of seed, grain, legume or pulse. This recipe makes a medium-sized loaf. It'll fit perfectly into an 8-inch or 20cm long bread basket. But let's get right to it. Let me show you how it's done. Starting with the ingredients, we'll need some white bread flour, whole wheat flour, yeast, salt, water, linseeds and buckwheat. You can replace the whole wheat flour with whole grain rye flour or spelt. You can replace the linseeds with any other type of seed. And if you can't find toasted buckwheat, you can use the regular kind. It will taste quite different though. But the bread will still be good, no matter which grain, seed or pulse you use. When it comes to the equipment, we'll need a bowl, scales, a dough scraper, temperature probe, something to slash the dough with. I would use my razor blade. You could also use a sharp knife or a pair of scissors even. I'm making a batad, so I'm using an oblong shaped basket. But you could also use a round banneton to make a boule. The same size for both will be just fine. You could even make this as a freestanding loaf, or you could turn this dough into buns, it's up to you. I will bake the bread in my Lodge cast iron combo cooker. It will bake the bread evenly on all sides, and the lid will prevent the steam from escaping, giving the bread a better oven spring. It is one of the greatest tools for the home baker. But don't worry if you don't own one, you can bake this bread on a tray. In that case, I would suggest you at least use a spray bottle of water to moisten the loaf before it goes in the oven. This is another great bread making tool. It is inexpensive and convenient. I even like to use it alongside my cast iron pot. A little bit of extra moisture will make things all the better. Right before we mix the dough, we need to make the porridge. In a small pan, combine the buckwheat and water. Add a little pinch of salt, taken from the total amount of salt in the dough. Place the pot on high heat and bring it up to a boil. Once it starts boiling, turn the temperature down low. Cover the buckwheat and leave it to cook for around 20 minutes or until all the water has been absorbed and the buckwheat is split open. And these same rules go for pretty much any grain that you may use. It may take longer or shorter time to cook, but at the end of the day, you want the grain to be cooked and the liquid to be absorbed or evaporated. I transferred the buckwheat to a bowl and I decided to add the linseeds to it. They will absorb the excess moisture evaporating from the buckwheat. And whilst the buckwheat will become slightly drier, the linseeds will become moister and softer. Okay, we'll cover this mix up and leave it to cool down completely. Once it has cooled down, we can move on to making the dough. My kitchen is around 21 degrees Celsius or 70 degrees Fahrenheit, so I'm using water that's around that temperature. Grab a large bowl, combine the water, the yeast, the salt, the whole wheat flour and the buckwheat porridge. Give it a good mix to ensure that the salt is dissolved completely and all the ingredients are dispersed evenly. Then add the white bread flour, grab a dough scraper and mix it to a dough. I will cold ferment this dough in the fridge, but you can ferment it at room temperature. Bulk fermentation at room temperature will take around 2 hours. Give the dough one fold halfway through. If you want to play around by using different grains or seeds in your porridge, I would highly suggest checking out the full video I made about this topic. You can find it in Principles of Baking playlist. You will learn all you need to know about the use of porridge in bread making. Okay, once the dough is fully mixed, give it a quick temperature check. Mine turned out slightly cooler than I expected, so instead of refrigerating it right away, I will leave it to sit out at room temperature for 30 minutes before giving it a fold and then cold fermenting it. If your dough is slightly warmer, place it in the fridge right away, leave it to cool down for 30 minutes and then give it a fold. Folding itself will be the same either way. The dough is slightly sticky, so dust it with flour, take it out of the bowl, place it on the table with the smooth side down, flatten it out, then fold the edge over the middle, go around in a circle to reach point where it started. Then flip it smooth side up again, tighten it against the table and that's the fold done. Place the dough back into the bowl, cover it up, and then place it in the fridge to cold ferment for 12 to 24 hours. Okay, it is the next day, the dough is puffed up beautifully. Now we can move on to pre-shaping it. Pre-shaping serves an important purpose in this recipe, mainly that it will build tension in the dough. This dough is quite slack, first because we didn't need it, and secondly because it spent so much time in the fridge. Pre-shaping it before final shaping it will allow us to build some tension into it, and this in turn will make it have a nice oven spring. So shape the dough into a tight ball, cover it up, leave it to rest for around 30 minutes. The resting stage takes a relatively long time because of the tight shaping and because the dough is cold. If you're doing a room temperature bulk fermentation, 20 minutes might do it. When it comes to final shaping, we'll not be doing anything fancy here. The dough is not very loose, so we don't need to stitch it or anything like that. Simply dust it with flour, flip it upside down so that the smooth side is on the table, flatten it out, and give it a tapered shape with a narrower top and a wider bottom. And finally roll it up nice and tight, starting from the top down to the bottom. If the dough becomes a little bit narrow, pull it out sideways and keep rolling. Once it's all rolled up, pinch the seam together and pinch the ends together. And then place it in a bread basket with the smooth side down. If you don't own a bread basket, you can use a cake tin lined with a clean cloth. And for a round loaf, you can use a bowl lined with a cloth. As I mentioned earlier, you could bake this as a freestanding loaf on a tray with some non-stick paper. In that case, you want to leave it to proof with the smooth side up. Regardless of what you choose to do, cover the loaf and leave it to proof for around 2 hours. If you're doing a room temperature bulk fermentation, the final proof may take an hour to an hour and a half. During the final hour of fermentation, you want to preheat the oven to 220 degrees Celsius, 430 Fahrenheit, fan on. And that's 240 Celsius or 465 Fahrenheit, fan off. And also preheat your baking vessel if you're using one. Once the loaf looks nice and puffy, it's ready for the oven. Remove the preheated pot from the oven, remove the lid, invert the loaf onto the pan, and then score it. This is a relatively stiff dough, so it's not going to produce a big ear. That's why I scored it pretty much right down the middle, with the blade pointing down instead of going in at an angle, which will make the loaf rise and open up evenly on both sides. To give it some extra steam, I also decided to spray down with water. This is not totally necessary when using a pot like this, but since the dough doesn't have very high hydration, it's not going to release a lot of steam. And that's why I like to give it a bit of a boost. Okay, cover the loaf up and let it bake for 25 minutes. Once the time is up, remove the lid and keep baking the loaf for another 10 to 15 minutes until you're happy with the color of the crust. And I'm definitely happy with this bad boy. It has risen and opened up nicely, and it has a beautiful golden brown color. The crust is crackling as it cools down, and it smells amazing. This turned out to be great bread, especially because of the buckwheat. Porridge is just one of many methods for making your bread softer and longer lasting. There is scalding, tangjong, yudane, soaking, the use of cooked vegetables, and various fats and dairy products. There are many methods for enhancing your bread, and luckily for you, I've made videos about all of them. You can find those in the Principles of Baking playlist. It contains everything you need to know about bread making, especially if you're a beginner. So head over there, and once you're done with it, check out all the other playlists for some delicious recipe ideas. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. But that will be all for today. As ever, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.